On this episode, we discuss the second season of The Mandalorian. We question how the show moves on, discuss the relationship between loss and mental health, cults, what this season means for the larger canon, and much more. I'm Captain Nostalgia, and this is the Victims and Villains podcast, a podcast extension of the nonprofit where we educate and engage individuals on mental health awareness through pop culture. So buckle up. Spoilers are ahead. Alright, Dan, on this episode, we have a blast from the past. A psychotherapist who hasn't been on our show in, I can say, a little over 3 years now. She made her debut at 2017, back when we used to do nerd news, like way back in the day. So it's nice to bring her back. She's a psychotherapist and a family and marriage therapist as well. Please help me in welcoming Justine-Mastin.
Yeah, Justine-Mastin. That's me. Yeah, thanks so much for having me back. I didn't realize it had been so long.
I didn't either until I pulled up Skype, but I remember talking to you about Star Wars so long after we got done recording the first time you were on the show, and our goal for 2021 has been to put more of an emphasis on mental health, so like bringing in more people from the mental health field. And I was like, it's a long shot, but I'm going to reach out and see if she would be down for The Mandalorian. And lo and behold, we got you back. Those of you guys that are listening to this right now, you guys probably can't see this, but obviously it's an audio podcast. But Justine actually has
it in your heart.
She has Grogu right behind her.
Mm-hmm. So. Yep, Grogu supports me when I work every day. And I talk about how each one of us has an inner child. And we're more likely to take good care of our inner child if we can imagine that our inner child looks like Grogu. You know?
I love that. Right?
Because who isn't just going to pamper that inner child if you can just picture little Grogu with the little grabby hands, just trying to Jedi mind trick your heart.
Oh, yeah. Just trying to sip on some tea and just going through the galaxy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's so nice.
I watched a lot of this season with my wife, and she's not typically a Star Wars fan, but if I had $1 for every time she like awed at something that he did, there would be enough money to probably pay off my car insurance this month.
It's definitely one of the highlights of the show, and the funny thing about The Mandalorian is how it has been able to just so non-controversially like bring Star Wars fans together, because you have people who love the original trilogy, you have those who are really into the prequels, you have those who like the sequels, then you have like a subsect of people who like Clone Wars is what they grew up on and they really love, but everybody seems to love The Mandalorian. I haven't really spoken with someone who's tried to get into it and hasn't liked it. Longtime listeners of this show know I've been a longtime Star Wars fan forever. I grew up with it. It is my favorite film series. As big of a fan as I am, I'm not as into the like expanded universe and some of the other properties. I'm actually going through Clone Wars right now, and I do want to eventually get over to Rebels and take a look at that too. Justine, Josh has told me that you are a huge Star Wars fan, which I think is very evident by your office decor that we see. But I definitely want to know some of your background, kind of what's your history with the series and kind of what does Star Wars mean to you and how is it important in your life?
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So I am also a cinematic universe fan. I have not dipped a toe into all of the rest of the galaxy of Star Wars, aside from it was either New York Comic-Con or San Diego. I think it was New York. Sarah Michelle Gellar was going to be on a Rebels panel, and even though I knew nothing about Rebels, I wanted to see Smidge. So I sat in, and I've seen one episode of Rebels because I went to that panel.
Nice.
That's incredible.
Right. I was like, I just want to see Sarah Michelle Gellar. She could be talking about anything. I'm a huge Buffy fan as well. So I grew up on the films. I was born in '79, so it's like I came up with them. And when I was in high school, actually, they did the re-releases in theaters.
Oh yeah,
which was amazing. And I went to those, and it was just so meaningful as a nerd growing up without internet. Like that wasn't really a thing when I was coming up, and so you see all these other nerds, and it's like, oh, I'm not alone, right? I love the mythology around Star Wars, the idea of the Force, and the Jedi are a little problematic. We can get into that, but but the idea that there is this power around us and within us, which from a psychological perspective harkens back to Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, right? That all around us and within us are these archetypes of our ancestors that we can tap into. And I think of Obi-Wan saying, if you strike me down, I should become more powerful than you could possibly imagine. And it's because he's becoming part of the collective unconscious. So anyway, I could nerd out a lot, but I love The Mandalorian. Let's see. I'm big into the original trilogy, so 4, 5, 6. Prequels, I don't know if it's that they are objectively not that great, or when they came out in my life, because I was like late teens, early 20s, and I was like, new Star Wars, no thanks, because I enjoyed the sequels. So I know lots of OG fans really didn't like them. I thought they were charming, delightful. But Mandalorian is a beautiful mythology, and who doesn't love space westerns?
Oh, 100%. And I've gone back and forth with the prequel series because there was a time when they came out, they were some of my favorite movies. I was pretty young when they were being released too, so I was very much caught up in that hype. And then the dust kind of settled and everything, and I was like, no, these are not good movies. Like, Lucas destroyed Star Wars. Like, it's terrible. And now, at this point in my life, I've kind of, like, I've accepted them. And it's just like, I'll happily... If anyone in my life invites me over saying we're going to watch a Star Wars movie, it doesn't really matter what movie it is. Like I'm in. If I don't have other plans, like I'm not going to say no to that. Yeah. And there are elements of those movies that I really like. And I've had an idea for like a spin-off podcast of Victims for a while that I want to call like That One Thing. And I haven't gotten around to doing it yet, obviously. But the idea is look at a film that is notoriously disliked and pick out like that one thing that's amazing about it. Oh, and the best example that I have is with Attack of the Clones. As bad as that movie is, the costume design is breathtaking. The John Williams score is fantastic. And even the scenery, like the set designs and stuff you see in that film, all so good. And breaking it apart and taking away everything else that people dislike, and the weird relationship between Padme and Anakin, and some of the wooden acting that you see, and all of the other complaints people have, those are things that I think you can really look at and say, like, yeah, like Padme Amidala's costume design in that film, every scene she's in something new. Like, that department kicks so much ass when they were trying to showcase her history of royalty, combining it with her current job as a senator. So that was some stuff that I found really impressive. Yeah. No complaints here around costume design. We can agree on that. Oh yeah, absolutely. The Mandalorian has been, so season 1, this was one of the things that was launched with Disney Plus, and it immediately, I feel like, was so strong right away. And as good as season 1 was, and I rewatched it in preparation for season 2, I was just reminded of how distinct each episode was, but how enjoyable that overarching plot line was. And you got to see the different directors that came in, and Bryce Dallas Howard had a episode that she directed, and it was just so good. And Dave Filoni, who came over from the Clone Wars, has been a huge part of this as well, and working alongside Jon Favreau. And I think that's what makes the series so successful, is it's made by people who love Star Wars, who are fans themselves and really want to put something out that is so great and appeals to so many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and you can really feel that because there are these nods, right? You get these moments that you can tell were from someone who loves the mythology.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I just all those little moments, and obviously like we get some characters, right? As someone who has not been into the animated world, my understanding is like I'm familiar with Ahsoka-tano, but I was like, oh, Ahsoka's in this, but I know some people were just like losing their minds.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like this is their favorite character has appeared. And how they just kind of like name drop people without really explaining it. It's like, if you know, you know. And if you don't know, you're about to find out. And that's just, it's so light-handed, right? It's not heavy-handed, like, here's this person and why they're important. And I know that bugged some folks, but I think we get to enter this world and really explore it. And yeah, you can tell that it was created by people who understood the mythology and wanted to like write a love letter to fans, right? Like, hey, here's Boba-Fett. Mm-hmm. If you know whose armor this is. He's going to show up.
And that was, what a way to kick off the season. And, it's really funny is these 8-episode seasons that they've done, it always leaves me wanting more. And it makes me wish that they would do longer seasons. But then at the same time, if the seasons were longer, maybe the episodes wouldn't be that tightly directed and that good. As much as I love a lot of shows on TV, like I know Josh, you and I have watched the DC shows like The Flash, Arrow, all them. Yeah. When you're doing 24 episodes in a season, you'll go many episodes without really anything making sense to the overarching plot. And then all of a sudden they'll need to do a recap to be like, oh yeah, that's the villain that we're going up against.
I think for me, from like a television perspective, I've really come to grow to like really appreciate these shorter seasons that much more. I think when you start to tell me that a show is 24 episodes, I immediately kind of get turned off. And a buddy of mine and I were recently watching Happy Happy Joy Joy, which is a documentary on Ren and Stimpy. And
I loved Ren and Stimpy when I was a kid.
I highly recommend that documentary. It's right now, if you have a library card, download the Hoopla app and check it out. It's a little less than 2 hours and it's super informative. But they were talking about like how hard the first season was, and the first season was only 6 episodes, and then they got greenlit for a second season where it was 20 episodes, and the creator was just like, I can't do this.
Sure.
Like, you're basically bringing in too much, and I'm so glad that Disney has kind of just kept it at this level to where they're like, we're gonna do 8 episodes, and each season is like still like pushing mythology forward and bringing in new elements to add to the mythology, but also at the same time, like, it's keeping it self-contained to where these are almost kind of like almost kind of like the trilogies, where it's like, okay, this is like one self-contained story that, like, if, like you were saying, like, if you know, you know.
I was breaking down the different episodes when we were going through the notes for this, and I was trying to pull really the main overarching key points that would be important to talk about today, because I don't want to go, play by play, scene by scene through the series, although that would be excellent for us. I don't think it would be very interesting to listen to. But to show you just how well written this show was, I really wanted to focus on the main parts. There are 8 episodes. I ended up pulling details from like 6 episodes that are key, important, critical moments throughout the whole season. And even the 2 episodes that I ended up skipping, it's not that they weren't important. They definitely are. And I feel like there are individual moments and characters that we'll definitely speak to. But Justine, you mentioned Boba-Fett. That was such a huge reveal at the end of that first episode. And even earlier, I mean, he walks in, and for a minute, like my brain like stopped working for a second, because I was like, oh my god, like that's Boba Fett. Like, he escaped the Sarlacc pit, like he is there. And then you come to find out that it's Timothy Olyphant, which is phenomenal casting.
Oh, so good.
Role.
Agreed.
Yeah, Cobb Vanth as the Marshal in Mos Pelgo. And I love this whole... So it was a 45-minute kickoff episode to Season 2, and Cobb Vanth basically recruits Mando to help him hunt and kill a crate dragon. And Justine, this goes back perfectly to what you said before. When you know, a crate dragon, you see the skeleton of one in A New Hope in the desert when the stormtroopers are searching for the droids. And it's also the yell when Obi-Wan Kenobi is introduced in A New Hope. He scares away the sand people by doing a crate dragon yell. And I love how this episode shows how deadly the crate dragon is, how they're going up and working with the Tusken Raiders, and you can see like why they would run when they hear the yell of a crate dragon. I don't know if either of you are huge video game fans, but this was like a live episode of Monster Hunter to me, because they were just going up against this impossibly gigantic, like just unleashing all these different weapons and trying to get the better half of it. Such a strong intro, and it just kicks so much ass. And I love seeing like the design of the crate dragon and really everything that they put into this episode.
It was so much better than the Mila Jovovich movie. Just gonna throw that out there right now. That movie was trash. So bad.
When I ultimately get around to seeing that, I'm sure you and I will debate that, and we'll debate Underwater in the same podcast.
Underwater's been a little over a year in the making. We should just make that happen next month. We'll talk about that off air. But I agree. This is a really strong, phenomenal opening to the season. Timothy Olyphant is just one of my favorite actors. I feel like he's so like underappreciated, and it really kind of opened up this season to kind of like show viewers that what you're going to see is it's going to be like deep cuts into the mythology of Star Wars. Whereas the first season, you were starting to kind of explore a little bit more of like areas of the mythology. Like this one was really kind of like going to the hardcore fans. This season felt like world building, but also introducing like casual fans to like hardcore fandom.
Yeah, well, and it's so fun to see folks who are kind of like newer to the fandom. Now they have characters that they really identify with, right? Even if they, can't harken this back necessarily. And even old school fans, it's like, oh, Carl Weathers is back. Like, oh, Cara Dune is back. I saw a great meme a while ago that basically said the Mandalorian is the story of a man who travels the universe and can't stop making best friends. And,
I love that.
And that's just so what it feels like. And now they've become our friends, and we're excited to see them again. So, we made some new friends. We got to see some old friends. But back to the opening. Yes, it was wonderful. I thought Timothy Olyphant was a great addition because, he's a Western dude. And they just threw some armor on him. And they're like, now you're in space. And he's like, that's fine. I'll act exactly the way I always do.
It makes me so excited to potentially see him in future Star Wars properties, either in more Mandalorian, or they have the ability now to have him do cameos in films than anything else. Like, I love that he's a canonical Star Wars character now, and I think there's more growth for him there.
I said this before we started recording. I am definitely kind of like the spectator in this episode, where I'm not like a super like hardcore Star Wars fans to the level that you guys are. I love The Mandalorian. I love the movies. But do you really feel like his character had enough significance to come back?
I trust in the writing and the directing of the team, especially with Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni. I think if Mando ever in future episodes gets really like pinned against the wall and just is in a really tough place and needs to do something insane, like go up against an entire, Imperial fleet or something, he'll want to get together, kind of similar to what happens at the end of this season. He'll want to get together his friends. And yeah, I think Timothy Olyphant could definitely be a good ally there in that mission.
Yeah, he could be part of the super team.
Yeah.
It's like the end of Endgame. All the superheroes arrive.
Yes. That's what I want, is just Mando to be like about to be just gunned down in his spaceship, and it's torn apart and everything's like not great, and then all of a sudden just ships start like popping out of light speed, and it's just everyone he's met over the course of the series, plus maybe friends. It's so great. And there's so many opportunities now, especially with the end of this season, with the Luke Skywalker reveal and everything. Like, this show, season 1, it was very much like exists in the Star Wars universe, but we're doing our own thing. And now it's merging more with the greater mythos of that universe. And the way that first episode ended, we see actor, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Tamara Morrison, who plays Boba Fett. He played Jango Fett in Attack of the Clones, and is now back to play Boba. I didn't recognize him at first. Enough time had passed. I was like, oh, and it was my fiance who was like, do you know who that was? Like, that was Jango Fett. I was like, oh, that's incredible. So then that's Boba Fett. So he's back, and then we don't see him again for a few episodes. But that just, it teased so great, like, where this series was going. And I think it almost felt like a reward of like, okay, like, after going through season 1 and everything that we've done there, like, we're going to now start dropping in more of this stuff that fans of the series will really recognize and appreciate.
Can I ask you guys something before we get too deep into the whole Boba Fett reveal? And you talked about like the comparisons between the first season and the second season. And the second season has more of that Star Wars like feeling. And I think that's because we're starting to see characters like Boba Fett that we've recognized from episode 5 and even episode 6 as well. But much like Solo, do you guys feel like it doesn't feel like a Star Wars property or IP, media until you actually see a lightsaber?
I don't feel that way. It's funny you bring up Solo, because Solo would have been the first live-action Star Wars film to not feature a lightsaber until the very end of the movie when they feature a lightsaber, which was one of my favorite moments, regardless of people not liking Solo for a myriad of reasons. That moment with Darth Maul like sold the movie for me. And here's the thing, if that had been the pilot episode of like a Disney Plus like Solo series, I feel like it would have been really successful. But because it was a standalone film and there hasn't really been anything to follow it up yet, we just had to see a lot of complaints about it. But no, Star Wars is such a huge universe. I don't think you need lightsabers. My dream someday is to have a Star Wars property where they never mention Jedi or never talk about the Force. And it's just showing what life is like for other people in the galaxy. And The Mandalorian does that to an extent, but with Grogu and his whole plot line, we definitely see that Jedi connection as well.
Yeah, I mean, Solo was fine. I don't have as many gripes with it as some folks do. I mean, there's only one Han Solo. And
Fair.
and I didn't feel like young Han Solo lived up to Harrison Ford, but like, who can? But Glover did a great job as Lando.
Yes.
He was a huge highlight of that film, and I would love to see. And I haven't looked too much into it, so there is going to be a Lando series on Disney Plus. I don't know though if it's going to be young Lando or if it's going to be like Rise of Skywalker era Lando. So I don't know if they've revealed that.
Give Billy D some work.
Well, I was going to say the end of Rise of Skywalker literally sets him up. And that other girl whose name I apologize I can't remember, to go like on an adventure together across the galaxy. And so I'm wondering maybe this series is them just like gallivanting across and you know getting up into all kinds of shenanigans there. But no, I would love to see Billy D return in a series of that capacity. I got to meet him at Granite State Comic-Con several years ago. Get his autograph, which I love, get my picture with him, which was great. And he was so much fun because you meet people sometimes who are resistant to like the thing that made them famous. Sure. And he was very much not like that. He was like, I was in Star Wars, and he told the stories and he talked about it and like he loved it. And he was so cool to all the fans. Like it's really nice just seeing him return for Rise of Skywalker, and I hope we get to see him more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I buried the lead of the question, which was, can there be a Star Wars movie without a lightsaber? Sure. Yeah, I would. I'd watch Lando gallivanting around the universe. He doesn't need any lightsabers to just be a smooth talking dude.
Oh yeah.
True.
I completely agree. When we mentioned world building earlier, and I feel like season 1 did a really good job at establishing and building this world and letting you know these characters. And then season 2, it felt like it just like took off, just like sprinting toward wherever the story was going to take us. And we haven't even moved past the first episode yet of season 2. And that's how much there is here. The second episode was one of my favorites, and this is where I thought that we might be encountering a theme where they are contracted to transport a frog lady and her eggs across the galaxy. They have to travel at sublight speed. They encounter a couple of X-Wing pilots, one of whom played by Dave Filoni. I believe another director plays the other one. His name is avoiding me at the moment. So apologies to that man. But they crash into this ice planet, and this is where I thought, is every episode just going to be them fighting incredible monsters and beasts? Because they end up in the spider lair, and just one of the most like skin-crawling, god-awful scenes ever from a severe arachnophobe.
No.
It was awful.
It was awesome. My wife watched that episode with me, and she is highly terrified of spiders. And I'm just like sitting there like a kid seeing his first horror movie for the first time. I loved that scene.
It was like Frosted Aliens. I didn't love it.
Yeah. It was horrifying. And we also, in the same episode, we see Grogu eat some of the eggs. Which
I have so many feelings about that.
See, people really freaked out about it. The thing to remember is that the eggs had not been fertilized yet. So to me, it's no different than us eating a chicken egg, although chickens are not as sentient as this lady was. So I don't know.
Okay, so I'm going to let you in on this conversation that I had. I also host a podcast called Starship-therapise, which is more of a, we talk about all fandoms, but you know, we frame it in a Star Trek way. So
nice.
I I straddle both. We were talking about this episode, and I was talking about how disturbed I was. Because, yeah, I get that they're not fertilized, and also it's the end of her line. Like, these are her ability to procreate, right? This is her ability to carry on the frog lady line, the frog lady lineage. And I was so disturbed by it, and I was like, is this supposed to be like our peek into how Grogu is going to go dark side? Because there were those rumors. And Larissa, my podcast host, had such a good point, which was, she spent a lot more time working with kids as a therapist than I have. And she's like, yeah, kids are kind of chaotically evil.
I don't disagree with that.
And Grogu's 50, but Grogu's also a child. Yeah. And, kids destroy things. They don't mean to. They don't realize they're destroying. And that helped me a lot to deal with the big feelings I was having, where I was like, no, don't eat the lineage.
There's such an innocence to him.
Yes.
And the thing with him, I really like that point of view, because I never thought for a moment that he might be turning to the dark side. But then when I really thought about it, the thing to keep in mind is he's at still a very formidable age where he's absorbing everything he sees, and what he's seeing right now is just violence and cold-hearted killing. He's witnessing Mando, a guy that he is for purposes, they're bonding as a father and child relationship, and he's seeing Mando just kill people left and right, sometimes because it's provoked, but other times that. There's a scene in a season 2 episode where the guy steals his jetpack, and he's letting him go and run away, and then he kills him with the remote for the jetpack. And it's like, he was escaping. He was on his way out. And you got to keep in mind, Grogu is seeing, he's internalizing all of this stuff that he's seeing. And who knows? I think it'll be interesting to see as that story develops, kind of where Grogu's character will go in the future.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now, and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Moving through the series, I think one of my favorite episodes came in chapter 12, which was the siege. This is when Mando and the child, they go back to Navarro. They meet up with Grief Karga, played by Carl Weathers. I also believe this is the episode that was directed by Carl Weathers. And they also team up with Cara Dune, and they have to storm an Imperial base. And it was so, so cool.
Let's not forget about Regular Guy. He is now canon.
Oh yes, Gene
the guy,
Sky, right?
Gene Sky, yeah.
So, yeah. I want an action figure of him. If they can sell action figures of someone that appeared in the background of Maz Kanata's castle, that was never named and never referenced in the film, but they have a figure of him, they can make Gene Sky an action figure, and they should.
I mean, people will buy anything, and Star Wars fans will really buy anything.
Oh yeah, I own the Laserdiscs, the original trilogy. I don't own a Laserdisc player, but I have them. I was in a record store in Salem, Massachusetts many years ago, and I saw them, and I was like, I gotta buy these.
Do you have them framed at least?
So they're not framed, but I do have. They're in their original packaging, and I have them up on a shelf. Actually, up on right behind the monitor, so you can't see it. But they are in this room, so I get to see them every day when I'm working and gaming and whatnot.
I mean, I have Nicolas Cage Laserdisc. I don't have a Laserdisc player, so
we're gonna have to get together.
Which Nicolas Cage?
Face Off.
Oh, that's
really?
Phenomenal!
Out of the whole canon, that's the one you have.
Well, so I was also in a record store, and they just happened to have Laserdiscs, and I was like, I think this is going to be my 2021 project where I'm just going to start collecting Laserdiscs and just framing them in my office, because I'm trying to get away from like comics in my office and like start to like do more with like film.
Is that the Face-Off Laserdisc behind you? I think I see it.
Yeah, it's covered. It's got a whole bunch of crap in it. I'll show you after we get done recording.
It looks awesome. There's a very slight aside. One of my friends is a librarian, and she said that they have a library of things now, which I didn't realize. So basically, they have, as an example, they could have like a record player, and so you could like check out a record player from the library. And so I was like, okay, so one, libraries should absolutely have like Laserdisc players, because that would be amazing. But we were talking about just one, how good of an idea that is, and you could have so many things like I don't know, like sewing machines and just stuff that someone might have an interest in, they have a talent in, but maybe not have the means or resources to either afford it or maybe don't have the space to store it. Like, that'd be awesome. If you want to do a project, you could go and check something out from the library for a couple weeks. I thought that idea was awesome, and I hope we see more of that as we move into this crazy, crazy alternate timeline that the 2020s are proving to be for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the show. One of my favorites. This was the first episode for me that really started to pull things together for the larger universe, especially the sequel episodes, because at the Imperial base that they're storming, they discover vats of cloned bodies. There are some hypotheses that these could be related to the Snoke clones that we see in episode 9. And we also see Dr. Pershing. There's a recording of him where he's talking about transfusing the blood from the child, and he references that he has a high M count, which is a nice shout out to midichlorians from episode 1, but in like a cool sciencey way, and not in a there are microscopic organisms living in your blood kind of way. But yeah, everything about this episode, this was where it just felt like things were really starting to move, not just episode to episode, but now there was like an overarching plot of, oh, like this is why the Empire is so interested in him. This is why there's so much conflict going around this child and everything that's happening there.
I have nothing to say about the siege.
Yes, Josh?
I was gonna say I do love how every time that we get to like say episode 7, or even with this one in particular, how they're always kind of drawing from the Force. Like every time like there's these like big like world changing events that take place in the canon, there's a law that you see as well where there's not any use of the Force going down, and this was kind of like the Empire like studying it and like basically saying, okay, here's how we're going to bring back the Force. And that I thought was an interesting twist that they introduced in this episode.
And this is where, as we move further into the series, it like double downs on that, because we hear Ahsoka-tano is mentioned to Mando as that's the Jedi you need to go seek, and everybody. Or I'll speak for myself, just like my heart started racing. I haven't even finished Clone Wars yet, but I didn't know, or I had seen some reports and rumors that she was going to be in this season. I didn't know when they were going to introduce her or how. But just knowing like, oh man, like we're going to see a live action Ahsoka. That's awesome. And in chapter 13, that's exactly what we get, played by Rosario Dawson. She's wielding these dual white lightsabers. She's kicking all kinds of ass. And this is also where we reveal that the child's name is Grogu. And Ahsoka is able to communicate using the Force with him. And we learn more about his backstory and how he was at the Jedi Academy, presumably when Order 66 was initiated, when Anakin slaughtered all of the younglings. He was able to escape and survive. And there's so much Star Wars lore, and I believe this is the episode that was directed by Dave Filoni, and he's someone who loves Star Wars and is really so into it that I feel like you can tell when there is a lot of Star Wars lore and backstory, especially to Clone Wars era stuff. He seems to be the one really championing that stuff, and I loved all those details in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, Rosario Dawson, and to be fair, I'm not steeped in Clone Wars, but I was glad to see Rosario Dawson play this character. I just don't know that I would have been as excited about Ashley Eccleston. I know people were like fighting for her because she's the voice, but she seems like a lovely human. I don't know that I buy her as a warrior. But I bought Rosario as a warrior. With the double lightsabers, I was like, yeah.
It was so cool, and it was nice seeing a matured Ahsoka. And I know as we get toward the end of Clone Wars and also in Rebels, her character develops quite a bit. One of my favorite episodes early on was she takes command of a team of pilots that have to go on a run, and she is making decisions and calls, and ultimately makes a decision that ends up in a lot of those pilots getting killed. And we see her struggle with that for the rest of the episode and deal with the fact that it's like, I'm responsible. Like, these people are dead because of a decision I made. And that's when I feel like she really started to turn as a character from a kid who would like talk back to Anakin and like kind of mouth off a little bit to being like, oh, like this is serious. Like, we're doing real important stuff and I need to carry myself as a Jedi. And this is what that means.
I think, in my opinion, her and, you didn't put it in the notes, Stan, but Bill Burr's character development in The Believer, I think, were the two big highlights for me in this season. When they made the announcement for Rosario Dawson playing Ahsoka, I immediately was like, I'm with Justine, like, I've never really driven. Let me try that again. I've never really dived into any of the animated series. I've tried several times, and it's one of my New Year's resolutions this year to finally finish that and rectify that. But she was so great, and she's one of my favorite actresses, especially when you're talking about fandoms. She's been in everything from DC to Marvel to Dark Horse to Kevin Smith films, and I just think that she has such a underappreciated presence, and getting to see her as Ahsoka was just amazing. And Dan, I know that costume design's big with you because of Abby's background in theater, but I have to say, like, from a costume standpoint, like, it is beautiful. They did a great job on her look and just nailed it. And to go back to the siege real quick, because that was the one with I have the notes here. That was the one with bo-katan. Katie Sackhoff was the first actress ever in Star Wars history to voice both bo-katan on Clone Wars and to bring her live action.
I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Katie can do anything.
Oh, amen.
Oh, jeez. I'm watching through Battlestar Galactica for the first time ever, and I just got to season 2.
Oh, Cara Thrace. You have so much to look forward to.
Yeah, I'm loving it. It's been such a fun, and it's one, it's aged really well, and two, it's aged kind of scarily with like the current political climate and just seeing like a cataclysmic, multiple worlds ending event, and then the government trying to like maintain control, and then the military trying to maintain control. It's such a fascinating like character study, and I'm having a great time with it so far.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be a little bit too much on the nose for me. Like it's
definitely a lot.
And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but Battlestar I have to watch in small doses because I feel claustrophobic watching it. Like they set that tone that you are on this ship and there is nowhere to go. Yeah. And I feel that when I'm watching it. I'm like, okay, I need to go outside.
I call I'm forgetting names, and I promise we'll get right back to Mandalorian. But the second in command to Admiral Adamo, I call him a Space John McCain because that's what he reminds me of and what he looks like. And so whenever he's on screen, I'm like, yes, like listen to Space John McCain. He's got good ideas most of the time. Sometimes he goes off the rails, but I generally like his character. So yeah, Katie Sackhoff, Bo-Katan is so great, and I love her team of like the female like Mandalorian warriors, and I also like that this is the first time I feel like that Mando is really confronted with, well, being a Mandalorian doesn't mean you always have to keep your helmet on. Like that's just one old-fashioned way of looking at it, almost like a religious creed. And I think Mando is now confronted because like he's never questioned it, and so now it's like, wait, is it possible to have both? And it's cool seeing that kind of crisis of character that he experiences.
And that's so real. Like that got me because folks who have been in cults don't know they were in a cult. They don't, like, and in that moment, he is confronted with these folks who are like, no, I'm like you. And I don't know that you know this, but like you've actually been in this really stringent cult. And he's like, no, I haven't, which is what anyone who is told they're in a cult is going to say. And yeah, but it triggers something in him to start questioning his reality, which is something we all do to some extent, as we're aging, usually. Mm-hmm. You accept everything your parents tell you as absolute truth until you hit like 11 or 12. And then it's like, wait, why do we need to eat Jif peanut butter? Maybe I want to have Skippy, what if we were a house that had Skippy and not Jif, which is like a very
world-shattering realization. You have that.
Well, and it sounds so mundane, but like when this is your first time thinking that things could be different, it is earth-shattering. Like, I could have Skippy, not Jif.
When I was in college, our residence halls, there was a policy of when you would walk in, the front desk staff, you would present your backpack and they'd basically pat it down to make sure you weren't like trying to smuggle alcohol or something into the dorm. This went on for years, and eventually the story that I had heard was the president of the university was doing like a tour one time and saw someone do this, and they're like, oh, what's that? And they're like, oh, like we packed down like their bags for contraband. And the president was like, yeah, we're not going to do that anymore. Like the kids live here. Like this is their home. Like don't treat them like every time they walk in, they're going to smuggle stuff in. And once that was changed and we no longer need to do that, literally I was like, I never thought that it was a bad thing to have my bag checked. But now that you mention it, and now that I don't need to, I can just walk in with my backpack. Like, yeah, what the hell, man? Why did we have to have my bag checked every time? That doesn't seem right.
The addition of the cults is something that really fascinates me about the lore of the Mandalorian, because from what I've been told, the Clone Wars has a great deal of Mandalorian stuff. So like what we're seeing in these first two seasons is kind of almost just a taste of what they explore a lot further into the Clone Wars and some of the animated series. And Boba Fett and even Mando that we meet in this series, I feel like the entire creed and like religion and world of the Mandalorian is so fascinating that it was kind of at that moment that I was like, I need to check out the series. I need to stop putting it off. I'm gonna do it. And so hopefully listeners hold me accountable. Tweet me. Just write me. Just be like, hey, how's your watch going? But no, I mean, to Justine's point, to what she was talking about, when you're come to this realization of, trying to understand, it's a cult. And when you look at some of the way that they handle the Mandalorian creeds in the first season, it definitely operates and it definitely feels like a cult, to where, this is the way. And man, I've just been saying this is the way so many times since that first season.
You've been indoctrinated. That was jon-faveru's whole plan.
But it's interesting to kind of see how he grapples with that throughout the entire season. And I don't know if you want to get into it now, but there's one scene in particular in The Believer where him and Mayfield are having to basically take off his helmet to kind of go scan for face recognition, and Mayfield can't do it because Joe Chill's over there just having space beer and he doesn't want to run into him. And it's the first time that we see the Mandalorian without a helmet on. And I mean, for him, like, that's that part of that questioning process of, is this really the way? Like, is this really a part of the cult? And kind of like getting to understand, like, what happens now that I've been told this, how is my mental health going to affect the decisions I make moving forward?
And what really matters to me?
Yeah.
What matters to me is this child who I see as my child. And in what world would my brethren tell me it's not okay to take care of my child? It's like you can see him having that internal struggle, and he's like, screw it. I'm taking care of this kid no matter what my people would say.
And also at the same time, like, he is kind of having this like identity crisis, because not only is he finding this stuff out about this religion that he thought was so safe and so secure, but also at the same time, he's losing his identity as he's on this journey to basically get Grogu home. And like we were talking about earlier, like there's almost this like surrogate father relationship that the two of them have established. So he's not only having the Mando Creed identity taken from him, but also that surrogate father identity taken from him.
Oh, we will get to that. I got a lot to say about the Jedi.
There's so much there. When when Mando removes his helmet in that scene and he's carrying on those conversations, there have been posts going on online that shows how Pedro Pascal plays that scene and how he plays it really as someone who spent most of his life with his head under a helmet. He doesn't use his peripheral vision when he's speaking or when he's reacting. He turns like his whole body or his whole head to look and view, and it makes sense that has been kind of his isolated way of seeing the world for so long. So I love that little directing, acting piece that's put in to really show just how bizarre having his helmet off is to this character. But that actually skips ahead a little bit. There's the episode The Tragedy, which was chapter 14, and that is where Grogu is actually captured, heartbreakingly so.
It was unacceptable. You do not tase that baby.
No. Well, you know what was even funnier is my fiance said, and I get her point, and I kind of felt the same way, because Grogu gets captured, and then Mando's ship gets blown up. And she's like, I know he's going to get Grogu back, but his ship just exploded. Like, I'm more sad about his spaceship at this point. Like, that's so sad. The thing I loved the most, the biggest thing that stood out for me in that episode was, if you've watched the Gallery Behind the Scenes series on Disney Plus, you know that many of these scenes are filmed on sound stages, and they have the huge screens that they're able to put up as backgrounds. This was very much practical. They were able to film outdoors. They were able to use all these different, good physicality with the set and everything. And it was so cool seeing just full-blown Mando in his armor, just like traipsing, like climbing like up a mountain and trying to get to this huge area. And then Grogu meditating and communicating with Jedi, basically sending out like a 5G signal, being like, hey, I'm here. I need someone to train me, so please help. And in this episode, we see Boba Fett come in action. We see Fennec Shand, played by Ming-Na Wen. Mulan herself comes in and kicks so much ass. And I believe this may be the episode, because we believe she is dead from season 1. And so I think it's a bit of a reveal to show that she is in fact well alive and is still capable of doing so much.
I loved Grogu meditating on that rock.
I love how, like, as a big video game fan, it felt to me like a timer now, because then the Empire shows up and you now need to defend him, and it's like, okay, how long until he's done meditating? Like, we have to protect him for this long. And then that those battles with the stormtroopers, like, that was such a cool scene. And then, of course, they finally are able to get to Grogu. And this is where we see, do the Dark Troopers make an appearance in this episode? I think they do. I think Mando's trying to get to the ship, and I think it's the Dark Troopers that ultimately fend him off and make it so that he's not able to retrieve Grogu.
Unacceptable. I had such big feelings watching this. I was like, I was so worried for Grogu, and then we discovered that his force shield will just like repel anyone. So I'm like, okay, so he's safe while he's meditating. Mm-hmm. But what happens when he reaches enlightenment?
Earthquakes.
I think someone pointed out to me that we see, I think in the following episode, when he's the prisoner, they have the tiny shackles that fit his hand.
They were ridiculous. Just the weensiest little like, are those Barbie shackles?
I know. And like, so did Moff-Gideon make these special for him, or do they have just child shackles available?
You see the armory, and it's just like shackles of all sizes. And shapes, you might have an octopus, so you need like.
It's true. Yeah, it's just the versatility of the Empire is really something to behold. But we talked a bit about Chapter 15 and him really figuring out, first of all, the location of Grogu, and also putting together his rescue squad. So Chapter 16, The Rescue, was the season finale of Season 2. One of my favorite episodes of the 16 that we've had to date. And we see that so many storm Moff-Gideon's ship, including Cara Dune, Bo-Katan, Kasaka Reeves, who was with Bo-Katan, and Fennec Shand. And Boba Fett, although doesn't have a ton in this episode, is able to assist them by luring them in and doing the chase and blasting them so they can send out that distress signal. Of course, we see Mando throw the Dark Troopers out of an airlock. And the thing that one of my friends mentioned, which I feel like I noticed subconsciously, but it wasn't a a top of mind thing at the time is that this episode, the whole boarding party and everything, it's all women, and I feel like we get to see
love it.
a really like it was so cool just seeing like a kick-ass like squad of women come in and just beat the crap out of the Empire. Like that was so cool to see, especially in a Star Wars property.
Yeah, as a lifelong Star Wars lover, I was well aware of that moment. I was watching it and I was like, there is not a dude in this scene. Like, show me anywhere else that is the case in Star Wars. And I mean, the thing is, like, we love our properties and we notice where they could do better. And that's a place lots of sci-fi, fantasy, and everything could do better. And I loved it. I was like, I bet there are some fanboys having an absolute fit right now. And I'm cool with that.
100%. And I'm happy you bring that up because fair to say, I like everybody on this call right now. Star Wars is one of my favorite things ever. And yet Star Wars fans are some of my least favorite people in the universe. Yeah. And I do think that it's a minority. It's a very loud, very angry minority. But from the harassment that we saw over The Last Jedi to people complaining that, Rey is a girl Jedi. That's dumb. Why can't it just be like Luke's son? That would be better.
Women shouldn't have any power.
Seriously. And I see it, and especially in games, you see it so much with, there's just a lot of toxicity there. And so I like that when you have properties being aware of these criticisms and then actively pushing back of like, no, like, okay, you don't think this is a thing? Well, let me show you why it is and why it can be and why women in this universe have a place to be and are so unbelievably important to the success of these missions and everything that's happening.
Yeah, right. That was the team. It was mostly women.
Yeah, I have always kind of been drawn to like stronger female characters. Like when I kind of like broke into comics, Wonder Woman was the first book that I really read, and like I just gravitated towards that character. And then like it's like, oh man, like Harley Quinn, Lara Croft, Witchblade, like all of these like female centric things. And so like it's been really awesome for me to, as a fan of these properties, to kind of see more diversity than just the average kind of like American like Homelander styled character that is coming to like challenge these archetypes. And I have really fallen in love with a lot of these female characters that the Mandalorian has done. We talked about bo-katan earlier, but Carla Ganina, I suck at pronouncing names.
Oh, Gina Carano.
Yeah, Gina Carano. I love her.
I
in
just
shows.
call her Cara Dune because Gina's a little problematic.
Cara Dune. I love her in this series, and kind of where her character goes in this season is pretty incredible. It's kind of like this like subtle like redemption story that they're able to pull off. It's like never heavy-handed. It's just kind of like, this is where she is now, and I really appreciate that touch. How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I love the moment that there's so much going on here, and finally when the Dark Troopers return and it's like, oh no, we're screwed, what's going to happen? And then the X-Wing arrives, and I forget who, but one of the characters is like, oh good, one X-Wing, we're saved. And the whole time I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, who's going to be in that X-Wing? Is it going to be one of the X-Wing pilots that we saw earlier? Is it going to be a Jedi? If it is it going to be... The whole time I was like, I feel like Luke Skywalker is too obvious an answer for this. And so he jumps out. They're not showing his face, and that was when I was like, okay, it's a known character because they're not showing us who this is. They're in robes. And as like I'm trying to analyze the gait and the posture as this character's walking, and I'm like, okay, they want us to believe it's Luke Skywalker. And then I'm trying to like analyze how they're walking, and I'm like, is this a female Jedi? Like, are they going to show us like, oh, you thought it was Luke, but check out this badass like warrior who's going to come train Grogu. And then, of course, the green lightsaber, and I'm like, okay, they're more heavy-handed that it's Luke. And then it ends up being Luke, which I was still surprised when he took the hood off after all of that. But my fiance made a really good point that when you watch that scene and the Dark Troopers are so terrifying and he just cuts through them like they're nothing and he just moves through. And she's like, it took a Jedi Master, like the best trained Jedi in the universe, to just treat those things like they're nothing. So of course it would be Luke Skywalker. I don't know how I feel about them using CGI and de-aging. Mark Hamill did provide the voice. But for me, at that point, like I would almost rather they recast and just find a young actor who resembles Mark Hamill. Like that would have been more
Sebastian
believable.
Stan.
That's what I'm saying. That was my entire argument after that sequence. So the day that finale premiered, my entire like social media was just like, oh my goodness, can't believe they just did this. And so like they're talking about how amazing it is, and finally when I got home to watch it, I ended up hating that finale. Like I was like it's good up till Luke, and then Luke kind of like kills it, because like they did really good at de-aging Leia in Rogue One. I mean, all right, so
they did
no,
okay
I'm not going to yuck your yum. If that sparked joy for you, I am happy.
Thank you so much for using yuck your yum, because I've started saying that, and I can't say that to anybody without getting a weird look and being instructed to never say that again. So I'm happy that it's made an appearance on this podcast, and I'm not the one to have said it.
There you go. But I feel like where you start to become mostly problematic is leaning on familiar territory, because so much of this season has been like deep cut fandom, whereas this is kind of like, oh, if you enjoyed all this other stuff we've thrown at you, here's Luke. And then also too, like his de-aging just looks so terrible. Like it's probably the lowest point in this season, which I mean it's like 5 minutes. Okay, I get it, but it just looks like when he's like talking, like it just looks like static.
And when you do that, you're limited with that. And if they had an actor, they would have been able to have more physicality, more emotion. They could have given him more dialogue, but when you're CGIing a face, you want that character to speak as little as possible. And so you only get a few lines. And that was my biggest problem with Princess Leia and Rise of Skywalker. I didn't mind that she was in the movie, and I thought they did a good job for what they had. But what could have been scenes of really good dialogue and conversation ended up with like one-liners. Like they turned her into a fortune cookie, basically. Like never underestimate a droid, and that was like her big line. And it's just sad when I see what they could have done and then what we end up getting.
Yeah, I mean they weren't going to recast, even though Sebastian Stan is right there. But okay, take a breath, Justine. So my husband had already been spoilered and he knew.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, have you guessed it yet? Have you guessed it yet? Like the Jedi's fighting through the dark troopers. Have you guessed it yet? Have you guessed it yet? And I'm like, I mean, it's gotta be Luke, but that's not very exciting. I mean, it is, but it's not like, oh my, Luke? Like, of all the Jedi, like, freaking, of course it's Luke.
Yeah.
And, you know, once he came through the doors and, like, you see the hand, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's Luke. So by the time they pan all the way up and he puts the hood back, and I was just, like, clawing my face with that deep fake Mark Hamill. It was so upsetting. Because we have anti-aging technology that is not this terrible CGI. Like, I haven't seen The Irishman, but my understanding is they de-aged Robert De Niro pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, they did really good job in that movie.
Boba Fett's actor, Tamara Morrison, in Aquaman, in the beginning, they de-aged him brilliantly, and then he's his normal, regular self the rest of the movie. Like, they can do it. They can do it well if they have the resources.
Right. Like, was Hamill unavailable to actually go there? And he could only do the voice? I don't know. But, man, it took me right out of it.
I think instead of Luke, it would have been nice if we went through this whole sequence and then they pull the hood down. It's just this, like, burned and scarred face, and Mace Windu makes a return.
Mace Windu! You know who we've been missing? Mace Windu.
I maintain that nobody in Star Wars has ever died from a fall, whether you're looking at Darth Maul, or even the Emperor proves to not have died. And so Mace Windu, we see him fall, we never see him die. So I believe he's out there somewhere, biding his time, waiting to return.
Bring him back, man. I mean, he's not doing the Marvel movies anymore. Disney, just that soundtrack of Disney backing up a lot of money to his back door.
So, can we talk for a minute about... we talked about deepfake Mark Hamill, and I feel relieved. Thank you for listening. I feel heard. But what really bothered me in this scene is that Luke says, basically, you have to give me Grogu because he has to be trained as a Jedi. And, like, no. This child is an autonomous human being, or whatever Grogu is, an autonomous Grogu, and it seems like Grogu wants to stay with surrogate dad. And why are the Jedi constantly stealing children for their own needs and wants? The Jedi are not a kind, thoughtful group of fighters. Like, it's all about the war and the creed.
It's very cultist, like we talked about with Mandalorian. And it's really, it's funny because when Star Wars is one of those fandoms that's like, when you have a fandom, typically a person who gets really into it, it's like they want to be the thing in that fandom. It's like you're watching Lord of the Rings. It's like, oh, like I wish I was Aragorn, or I wish I was an elf, or you're watching Star Trek, and it's like, man, like being a Starfleet captain would be so cool. Star Wars is my favorite thing in the world. I do not want to be a Jedi. If I was in that universe, I would want to be a starship captain, sure, a pilot, maybe a smuggler. But no, a Jedi is such a restrictive lifestyle. And I don't like the black and white nature of it.
Right.
And What I've thought about for a long time, and I think in the expanded universe, there's something known as the Dark Jedi, and I think they tried to kind of do it with Rey as like a gray Jedi, but it's someone who leans into the dark side of the Force but uses it for the power of good. So you're having abilities like Force Lightning and these other dark side powers, but you're fighting essentially on the side of the light side. And I want that. Like, give me like a Dark Jedi trilogy that really goes deeper into that. And so I don't like this this whole thing that Yoda really created of like, well, you know, fear leads to hate and hate leads to anger, or anger leads to hate. And it's like, no, there's more nuance to that. And you bring up such a good point. Like, stop taking children. Just stop it. Don't do it.
Yeah, it's just wrong.
It is, and this brings up an even sadder point, so we can discuss, was Grogu at Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy when Kylo Ren burned it down and killed everybody?
I'm sure Grogu had already graduated and had moved on to whatever it was that Grogu's do. And yeah, no, that's rejected. I reject that Grogu died in the Padawan genocide.
I think one of the articles I'd read about this was when we, in The Last Jedi, when we see things from Kylo Ren's point of view, he doesn't mean a lot of what happened to happen. He doesn't mean
children are chaotic evil.
Exactly. And so it's like burning down the academy was accident, more or less. And then from his point of view, what it seems to be is that the Jedi trainees who fought back like were killed in self-defense. But I like to think that if Grogu didn't resist directly and maybe it was just like, oh no, like this place is on fire, I should just go. Like, he probably could have just escaped. And I have to believe that that is true. Like, he can't have been murdered. Not like that.
No, and a part of me very much hopes that Grogu spends some time at the Jedi Academy, realizes, you know what? I miss Mando. I have some Jedi powers. I have some Force powers. That's cool. That's enough. I want to hang out with Mando, and that they became a family again.
So are we eventually going to get a teenage Grogu, like a teenage Groot?
Oh, a teenage Groot! Just slurping bone broth, being all moody.
Yep.
Well, I guess we can kind of like get into like predictions for the third season, if you guys want to, kind of with that, you know, transition of whether or not we're going to see Grogu again. I think we'll see him in the same capacity that we saw Carl Weathers' character, and in the next season. I think the next season's gonna. My prediction is that they're going to really kind of thrust Mandalorian into like the war of Mando. I think that's kind of my prediction for the third season. I feel like that's the one that they kept kind of continuously introducing throughout the course of the season. So that's my bets.
I'm so disappointed to see Grogu go because he's been there since the first episode, and I do hope we get to see him come back and be there in some capacity. But I do think that this show is so much bigger than just the Mando Grogu relationship, and so seeing where Mando goes next, like, that's the show, and I think it will continue to evolve for however many seasons they want to reliably keep it going, preferably while the writing is still good and not just, you know, let it go until it becomes the villain of Disney Plus.
Yeah, I mean, I think Mando's going to continue making best friends. And it sounds like he'll do a little bit more fighting, but like he's constantly fighting anyway.
Yeah.
And that we'll see more of that identity formation, so that now that he's questioning his reality, he'll decide, like, do I align myself with these Mandos, or am I, you know, clearly I'm not so much aligned with the the Mandos of old. But I don't know that I'm aligned with the bo-katan Mandos either. Maybe I am a one-man doe.
That would work out. He could get an emblem of like a female deer, and he could be like, I am the man doe. And that would be, and he could start his own religion. No, then we would just get back into cults. I think he has to do his own thing. What I am waiting for, and maybe we'll see in season 3, is at the end of season 1, we have the female Mandalorian like general, like the leader of the underground. She survives when all the others were killed, and at the end we see her grab her equipment and leave off screen. So she's still alive and out there, presumably, and I'm just kind of waiting for how and when they're going to reintroduce her.
I forgot about the armorer.
Yeah, I think it'll be... I can picture a moment, maybe they'll have it be if in a Mando scene, if his helmet is off and they come face to face, and he has to kind of explain. Yeah, and she's like, "You've lost the way," and he'll be like, "This isn't the way," and then it will just, I don't know, maybe they'll fight. Who knows?
We're great at predictions.
Yeah, we're so good. I do think that the show, we focus a lot on mental health, and I think we touched on a lot of these really good areas, from the cult part of it to handling that father-son relationship and kind of your struggle with your identity. Loss is a huge scene in this, of course, Grogu being the biggest one, but we see, I think, a lot of loss throughout the series, and how each character kind of has to deal with that and kind of come to terms with who they are and what they're willing to sacrifice to move forward.
Yeah, which is kind of like that is the Star Wars story, right? It's the story of transgenerational trauma. It's the it's the trauma of your fathers and your fathers' fathers, and it's like, and in Mando's case, does he have memory of his birth parents?
Very little. We see that one flashback of the day that like his family was killed and his home was attacked. So not really.
Yeah, but he carries on the trauma of the Mandalorian people, and I mean we see it obviously, very notably with the Skywalkers. And yeah, there's a lot of pain in the Star Wars universe. Even though it's often very lighthearted, there's a lot of sadness in the middle of all the pew pew pew.
Yeah, it follows the Holes trend of this is all because of your no good, dirty, rotten, pig stealing great great grandfather, and then Shia LaBeouf has to go dig holes for many months, and that is now Mando's curse and really Luke Skywalker's curse. They're born into it. I do look forward to the future of the Star Wars universe and breaking away from these family connections, because there are so many other stories to tell, and it's like I would love just leave the Skywalkers in the past and let's, what's the next generation? What's new? We are getting a bunch of new Star Wars properties. Of course, at the end of this season, the Book of Boba-Fett was announced, which was not announced like the week prior. Disney released tons of information about their upcoming series, everything from the Marvel series to Star Wars, and they held on to the Book of Boba-Fett so that it would be revealed here. I loved seeing Jabba's palace again. I loved seeing those characters and Boba Fett just come in and kind of take over. And I'm so excited to see, like, is Boba Fett going to become like the next Jabba the Hutt, like the next crime lord of Tatooine? We'll have to see. But I think that season, that series could be really cool.
I'll watch it.
So excited for that series. When they announced it, like, just him on the throne was one of my favorite images in any media last year. So cool. But I want to jump in real quick and kind of add my 2 cents on mental health. And I think I mentioned this earlier, but the character of Mayfield, and I mentioned this in our first season episode, I really wasn't so much of a fan of his character. Bill Burr is a comedian. I can kind of take or leave.
Mm-hmm.
Was it the Boston accent? It was the Boston
It's
accent.
not the Boston accent. Stand-up comedy is like, I'm very particular about my stand-up, but just being able to see him when he shoots the commander officer, and just you see how much pain and peace he's at now, that crossroads between, you know, he's been carrying this entire time. And when we meet him in the first season, like, he's very heavy on like joking and like sarcasm and like wit, and so once you kind of like get to know him a little bit more in this episode, it definitely feels like a lot of that is a deflection, a coping mechanism to really kind of avoid some of the things that he had to do in the Empire. And I just enjoyed that perspective, because I don't ever typically like Justine was just saying, like, you know, Star Wars is like a galaxy of pain and trauma, and it's like this like interwoven into the tapestry of the lore. And to kind of get to see that from, like you were talking about earlier, Dan, like just an average guy, like this is a universe that the biggest threat touches the smallest being. And to kind of, you know, go through the worst thing that you've just kind of ever been forced to do, and live with that trauma for years, that was, I feel like, just one of the most impactful things that happened in this season for me as a viewer.
We didn't even discuss, I think, one of the great scenes that Cara Dune has, where she comes face to face with an imperial officer, and he notices I think it's the teardrop tattoo signifies she was from Alderaan, and he says, "Oh, I was on the Death Star," and she kind of hits back like, "Oh, which one? Like, we blew up both of them, so which one were you on?" And then he kind of taunts her back of like, you know, I watched your world like be destroyed, like we destroyed it, and then it's a I like that you have this one event from the original Star Wars film that's still like reverberating across this universe, and you have these characters like, to us, like, yeah, Princess Leia was from Alderaan, but we never really got to see the emotional impact of that. In fact, there's a moment that it's kind of it's jarring now when I watch the first movie, because when she gets back to the Rebel Alliance, one of the generals is like, "We heard about Alderaan, we're so sorry," and she was just like, "We don't have time for that. We have the plans. We have to go attack the Death Star." And it's like there's no time to mourn the loss of the planet. So I think Cara Dune here has a really good role to fill in that we're seeing like the emotional backlash of the planet being destroyed, of that happening. And so that was another scene that I felt like really resonated well across just the emotional spectrum of everything that we see in the series.
Yeah, well, there's not an immediacy, like there's some space and there's some time. With Leia, it's like, yeah, Alderaan just blew up, also everything is all messed up, and like we're in the middle of a war. Like, I can't, which is what happens for people in the real world, is like, in a war, terrible things happen, and that's how you move forward. It's like, I can't stop and grieve right now. I will grieve later, but in this moment, if I stop and grieve, I will not be able to, you know, be the leader I need to be. And now there's less immediacy. Like, we are not currently at war. So these two veterans are, you know, my side won. No, my side won.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's nice to see some growth and some space afterwards. Like, clearly some Alderaanians
Right.
Sure, weren't on Alderaan when it blew up.
Yeah.
And how are those folks doing?
I would love to see kind of like in the Marvel Cinematic Universe after the events of Thor Ragnarok and seeing the ship of all of the Asgardians and finding a home on Earth in Endgame. And it's like, I would like to see, is there a planet out there or a civilization of that like Alderaan like flocked to? And what happened? Like, I think there's some good storytelling there. Justine, I really liked, the more I think about it and the more you mention, this show is about Mando just going around the universe, picking up best friends and making friends everywhere he goes. One of the key points that I had put down here was loneliness, and he was very much a lone ranger of sorts in the beginning of the series. At the end of the first episode, he really only teams up with IG-11 out of necessity, and then he cares for Grogu, and then he just meets and teams up with more people. That by the end of season 2 now, what would have been a solo mission for him at the beginning of the series, he has this whole team of people willing to risk life and limb for him and help him retrieve this child. And I agree. I'm excited to see who else he meets and everything else that goes on. The Star Wars universe is such a rich tapestry, and you have such a good opportunity for great diversity there. I think there's a lot of different stories that can be told, and it gives opportunity for many, many different types of actors to come in and really give life to a lot of these characters. So I think we're just going to see, especially with Jon Favreau in charge, I trust him completely to just take this franchise and, do what he wants with it and just keep going, because it's been gold so far and it's been so awesome. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up everything we have to say about The Mandalorian Season 2. This season was so great, and this episode, thank you both for joining us and taking this and talking through all of the moments, all of the great scenes and character development that we saw. Season 3 cannot come soon enough. And I already want to go back and watch season 2, especially since I got a new 4K TV around Black Friday. So I watched like half the season on it. So I want to go back and watch like the Crate Dragon battle, like on my new nice TV. So I got to go back and check that out. Well, Justine, thank you so much for joining us this week. Where can people find you online?
Thank you. So you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Mind Body Fandom, because I take a holistic approach to healing, mind, body, and fandom. You can also find me at my website, blueboxcounseling.com, and check out my podcast, Starship-therapise, wherever podcasts are found. And I have a book of the same name, Starship-therapise, Using Therapeutic Fan Fiction to Rewrite Your Life, is available for sale right now from all of your favorite booksellers, and it'll be available out in the world on May the 4th, Star Wars Day.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for joining us. As always, I am Dan Rockwood. You can find me on Twitter over at drock6499. I know those are some weird numbers. I tried to make it drock64. I think that was taken, so that is where I am at there. I do a lot of video game tweets and movie tweets, and yes, some political tweets as well. It's hard not to these days with everything going on in the world, but that is where you can find all that over there for me. And Josh, what about yourself?
You guys can find me on Letterboxd. It's at Captain Nostalgia, and I've also been sharing my film journey throughout 2021 on our Instagram at Victims and Villains. We're also on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Letterboxd as well. Or you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net, where you guys can find more episodes, movie reviews, and most importantly, suicide prevention resources are a great library. So until next time, we're going to go fly away.
This is the way.
No, Dan, that's a cult.
Fair.
Oh.